Okay. So a very, very good evening to everybody who is here. I'd like to welcome Tanvi Mallya, who is a neuropsychologist by the qualification and is also a founder of Tanvi Mallya, Mallya Elderly Care Services. And we are here today to talk about how the pandemic has actually impacted the mental health of elderly, and specifically Tanvi's organization and the work that she does. One thing that really interested us in having this conversation was to just understand how much the elderly as a population on whole gets sort of ignored. And even when the pandemic started, I think Project Mumbai also launched an initiative called Maitri, which focused on mental health of the elderly. And we came to realize that that was a population which was only being talked about. Hey, we need to keep this population safe because they are vulnerable to a physical concern, but very, very rarely do we find that anybody talking about the kind of mental health concerns that the elderly population can experience also. And as a result of that, there are little to no facilities or any other help available or resources available in our country, so to say. So I'd like to formally invite you, Tanvi, and thank you for agreeing to meet with us as well. And at the same time, maybe if you could, like, if there is anything that you'd like for us to, like for you to say before we begin with the question and answers, if that this would be a good point to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Devika, for having me over. I think it's a great initiative by both Project Mumbai and Fitket, especially because they are focusing a series of these talks on the elderly.
Yeah.
I think even in the realms of mental health, elderly mental health or mental health of seniors gets spoken about very little.
Yeah.
It receives almost little to no attention, and
Yeah.
I think as a country that is aging very fast, will be the country with the most number of senior citizens by 2040. I
Yeah.
think we as a country cannot afford to be ignorant anymore.
Yeah.
And I think awareness is something that we definitely need to build on. So uh,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to thank you guys, for taking this topic up and,
Mm-hmm.
ensuring that, you do your bit as well towards, building on this awareness, because it's
Yeah.
something that we've been doing consistently since 2014, since the time that
Yeah.
TMEC has started on. And uh, there is some hope, there is some joy in knowing that more and more organizations over time want to speak about it. Uh,
Yeah.
Started out, it was just as maybe one or two others, but that's about it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking this on.
Thank you, Tanvi. And actually, on that note, that I think is an excellent segue to what my first question was. That I think globally this has been such a challenging year for all of us, and it still continues to be. Maybe not in the same aspect slash fears that it was, but I think 2021 is not less challenging. I think it's come with its own set of unique challenges. But if you could just maybe spend some time and talk about how the last year was for you, was for the facility, was for the organization, if you could maybe shed some light on that, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So Devika, personally, I am somebody who, uh, thrives on my anxiety. So when and I think in some ways that helps me uh, lead.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a way to kind of figure, sort of channelize it into making me, better at what I do, better at
Right.
my work. And I think that really maybe somewhere, saved my team, saved us through this pandemic, because
Okay.
I think I was very closely reading up on what was happening, in other countries, and how
Yeah.
the situation was being dealt with elsewhere. And
Yeah.
I think by Feb is when we'd already started reaching out to the families that we were already working with. And,
Okay.
we'd started telling them, and let's, of course, now it doesn't, maybe we don't remember, but at that point in India, if you were in India in February 2020, you
Yes.
wouldn't really have thought that there was a lockdown coming, you know.
I absolutely, even in March for that matter, Tanvi,
Yeah.
nobody saw it coming.
Yes, but I mean, I just wanted to be prepared, you know, just in case.
Sure.
So, see, what happens is with youngsters, with people say our age, with
Mm-hmm.
people in their 40s or 50s, they are better with technology. They are able to, you know,
Absolutely.
sort of. Uh, they haven't had as much difficulty sort of making that transition, moving their lives from you know, real to virtual over the pandemic. But with the elderly, and because
Mm-hmm.
we also work a lot with people who have dementia or other kinds of neurodegeneration, you can only imagine how much more difficult it is, you know, this transition for them. So I knew that should this happen at that point, you know, it might actually be quite devastating for the family,
Absolutely.
you know, or for the elderly that have some kind of degeneration, especially. So we'd already started working with families. With you know, we'd started. It believe me, it was difficult because most families, you know, most elderly were not very thrilled about things going
Yeah.
online, and they said,
Yeah.
hey, listen, you know, we're very happy to do sessions in person, and you know, we
Hmm.
really look forward to them, or you know, my mom or my dad looks forward to them, but if you're going to do them online, we're not keen. And I said, listen, we're not going to do them online, but you know, just on the off chance that it does go, you know, we just want to be prepared.
Yeah.
A lot of convincing. I was for
I can imagine.
15, I think for 15 or 20 days, I was on phone with different families. My team was, you know, working with them to kind of get everything online, because each
Yeah.
team member handles, like, you know, works with a bunch of clients, works with
Yeah.
elderly. So, but I had to, you know, I was personally on call with a lot of the
Yeah.
families, trying to explain to them that while there was no intention to move the sessions online, this is just something we wanted to do. And
Yeah.
you know, a month later, when nobody anticipated and we went into lockdown, you know, a lot of families actually said, hey, you know what, let's stop for 15 days, let's stop for 20 days, because I think there was this whole conversation about, oh, this is just going to last for 2020,
Temporary.
you know, let's just
Absolutely.
stay at home. Nobody saw it as you know, something that's going to go on for a year or something. That's,
Exactly.
you know, and I think that has been devastating, because
Mm-hmm.
we have treated it you know, with a sense of it being temporary. And you know, the people at the receiving end of those decisions have been the
Yeah.
elderly. So you know, when this situation has gone on a lot longer than, you
Hmm.
know, it was anticipated to, we see I mean, even globally, you know, now there are studies where neurologists, where a lot of researchers are claiming that because of this period of lockdown,
Mm-hmm.
it has accelerated the aging of the brain for most people as much as by 10 years.
Yes.
You know, I don't know if you've read, you know, if you've come across these studies, but, you know,
Yes.
that's just heartbreaking, which means that, you know, the kind of work that we're doing with the elderly, whether it is emotional, whether it is, you know, focusing on retaining and strengthening their cognitive abilities, the need for that is greater now than ever before, you know.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely.
That's something that we observed in our work as well,
Hmm.
because well, while you know, we were able to not work with everybody online, because uh, the more advanced cases in degeneration, you know, it's very difficult to work with them online, and we definitely try, but you know, it's not as effective for some, but for most it is possible, you know. So
Okay. That's
while
nice.
I think in the more advanced cases, there unfortunately there has been you know, a limitation in
Mm-hmm.
just everybody's abilities to work with them, and this is not a problem that just we are facing. This is you know, a problem that mental health professionals that work with the elderly across the globe are facing, because
Yeah.
as a team, you know, myself, I have tried to stay updated. The team has tried to stay updated. There have been multiple, you know, conferences or webinars that became open as a because of the webinar, which was, say,
Yeah,
hosted by the mental health societies in Australia or Mexico or America, and we had access to their experiences.
of
But
course.
this seems to be, a common limitation where if you're unable to visit or work in person with somebody in their advanced stages of degeneration, it is difficult. Like there seems to be no way out of that. However, we previously worked only with families and the elderly in Mumbai.
Yeah.
Owing to everything moving online, we're not now able to work with families and elderly across the whole of the country. So we have a lot of elderly from very remote villages in Rajasthan or in Jharkhand, or in Hyderabad, the very remote areas of Andhra Pradesh, who are reaching out to us and who we've been able to work with, which I don't think
Absolutely.
is something that we could have done prior to the lockdown, because we were all so close to, with respect to whether teletherapy will even work. So yeah, I think that's primarily how the past year has been. We have seen
Hmm.
more acceptance, I think, because suddenly in the pandemic, social media became like this stage for anybody working in the mental health
Oh, yes.
space.
Yeah.
And I think that really boosted a lot. Openness in general maybe helped with lower stigma to some degree, because over this year we've also had a lot of typically up until now it
Mm-hmm.
was the families that would reach out. Mostly, sometimes it would be the elderly, but mostly it'd be the
Hmm.
families that would reach out to us. But in this year we've had elderly themselves reach out to us. We've had people in their early 60s reach out to us, and say that I think I need to talk to somebody, or
Yeah.
this is happening to me and I'm a little scared. Is there anything that
Yeah.
you can do to help? So
Yeah.
I think that has been a trend that we have seen over the
Yeah.
past
Yeah.
year. So yeah, I think that's pretty much been our journey through this very extended 2020 that is still going on.
Indeed.
But yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Tanvi. I think one thing that I'm really picking up from what you're also saying is that the foresight that you had with something, or maybe it was intuition. I don't know what is the right word for that, but it seems like that really helped you, prepare for something, or at least start conversations around something, which might have taken so much longer had it come after the lockdown. Because I remember when the lockdown was also initiated, all of us was so panicked in general that it this was may not have been the priority for most of us. It was like procure food, procure whatever. And for you to have initiated this in or even thought about this before, I think that sets you apart in such a unique way as well. And the other thing that I really liked what you also said is that this whole rolling with the resistance bit of it, that there were elderly who were not very happy, or the family members were not happy with that transition online. And I can imagine why. And I
My
think all of
team was
us.
skeptical. I had to start with my team, where
Exactly.
because see, with the elderly it's difficult. It's not just teaching the elderly to get online, right? Like we
Yeah.
had to put in place systems with the family. So if there is, say, an attendant, we had to teach the attendant how to help the elderly get online for his session, or
Yeah.
assist him or her technologically. So uh, be, to be able to do that, I had to first train my team to be able to do that, who then went out. So it started from there. And I think I'm at that point, I may have sounded crazy to a lot of people, but I'm really glad that I stuck to my guns and followed through with it, because I think that is really one thing that has helped ensure that we are able to work with
Yeah.
the elderly through this very challenging period.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I'll just maybe pick from that. And would you maybe be okay with expanding on this idea? What does it actually mean to work with elderly, and what are the kind of say interventions, I don't know if that's the right word, that you guys usually find yourself sort of applying when you're talking with the elderly, or when you're working with the elderly, some common concerns that they might have brought out in this period of lockdown as well, if you could maybe spend some time talking about that.
Sure, Devika. So I think, speaking about what it is like to work with the elderly, I think in India especially, uh, there is there is a lot of ageism. Even amongst, and it's very subconscious. It's very
Mm.
automatic. In the way we
Mm.
speak, in the way that we connotate age.
Mm.
So I mean, even if you look at very simple ways in which we address a lot of things, so for instance, if you have a friend who's turning older, there'd be a lot of jokes which kind of
Yeah.
negatively connotate that
Yes.
process. We tend to sort of associate age or the process of aging with somebody who is really frail, who is really dependent, who is unable to,
Absolutely.
who is a
A
liability.
liability. Yeah.
Yeah, who is a liability, who is unable to make decisions for themselves. I think
Yeah.
that is a massive challenge, that poses a massive challenge to also diagnosing and treating seniors, because as you see, if you talk to people who are in their 50s or 60s or 70s, there would be some amount of resistance to seeking help, or seeking even a diagnosis, or seeing a doctor.
Yeah.
Amongst GPs themselves, amongst a lot of doctors themselves,
Yes.
there'd be very heuristic diagnosis of the individual, and it wouldn't really be as evidence based or as test based as it should be.
Absolutely.
If somebody who is say 55 or 50 walks in, if I am a neurologist, which I'm not, but if somebody age 50, 55 walks into my clinic, it wouldn't be very unthinkable for somebody to just maybe uh, uh, deny, or to not look in the direction of something like a dementia or a degeneration that is present. And I think what happens, and this is not only the case in India, this is the case everywhere globally. There are some forms of dementias that actually happen much earlier than say an Alzheimer's, and most of these, they go unnoticed for a very, very, very long time, because there are no investigations being made in that direction.
Right.
uh, Now, whether in terms of interventions, whether you resort to uh, you know uh, uh, pharmacological or non-pharmacological interventions,
Yeah.
whether it's medicines or therapy, or a combination of both, they're the most effective in the early stages. They're not as effective, or it's always better to do it than not, irrespective of when you start. But the earlier you do it, the more effective it is. So
Yeah.
I think if you're only picking up on these signs towards the later stages, and you're resorting to some form of a treatment or therapy towards the later stages, you're already losing out on the quality of life that you could assure for that individual. you
Exactly.
know I also think that as a culture, because we're so used to terming aging as second childhood, uh, um,
Infantilizes their experience.
it
Yeah.
infantilizes their experiences. It doesn't kind of give them or their experiences the respect that it deserves.
Absolutely.
I think as therapists, as people who are working within this space, I
Yeah.
think we at the very least cannot afford to have that outlook when we're
Yes.
working with this population.
Yeah.
We cannot afford to have a one size fits all outlook, which is unfortunately what we've seen across
Yes.
Where because typically psychologists are not the first ones that people reach out to.
Yeah.
We've seen prescription pads being written where there are medicines being written, and there are things like practice Sudoku or crossword every day being written, which is a one size fits all prescription. If that
Yeah.
person is degenerating and has never played Sudoku or has never played crossword in their
Yeah.
life, what is the point of reference, and why this is just going to make it more difficult for that individual cognitively and emotionally.
Absolutely.
Then so I think we need to be able to make cross referrals, because when a lot of cases come to us and we're not sure whether the diagnosis is correct, we have not gone and told the family that this is not the right diagnosis. We've always referred them to the right medical practitioner to maybe get a second and a third sometimes opinion. But
Yeah.
I think when it's the other way around, sometimes referrals don't come to the right people, and that makes it more difficult for the elderly, because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Also, so traumatic as well, Tanvi. I was just
it is.
thinking while you were also talking about it. I mean, I think one thing that you're again pointing out, which stays with me, is that, and you immediately transported me back to when I was training to become a therapist and doing geriatric counseling. Our professor asked us, write a bunch of words that come to your mind when you think of elderly. And more often than not, we landed up saying words that had much more negative connotations. Slow, or they are annoying. That was something I remember that came up so much, and nagging and so on and so forth. And see that you're also highlighting something so important, the attitudinal sort of space of the caregiver, of the service provider, of family members. I think that plays such an integral role in rendering care to the elderly more than anything else. Of course, it does in all of our clientele, but I think in this part, because culturally also there is this narrative that goes around, oh, old people are wise, old people are, they are either they're put up on a pedestal or they are just thrown down. So there's no in between. So I think it's so important to also maybe take a step back from that narrative and reevaluate that, and also give contextually relevant interventions like you talked about, which means I don't know how many of our grandparents ever played Sudoku, to be very honest. I don't think they even know, to be very honest. And it's
Exactly.
not their fault because that's not their context. So
Exactly.
I think you're bringing up so many important points. But I would like to understand from you, Tanvi, that what was it like for your perhaps employees and yourself to sort of transition into online sort of living? Because most of us are, I mean, uh, right now we are also. So, how was it like? If you don't mind, sharing that
No,
with me.
I think it wasn't a cakewalk.
I'm
Uh,
sure.
but I think what really helped is my anxiety, because we identified it. We started doing this a lot earlier. I kid when I say that.
Yeah,
But I think because I was a little worried as to what would happen if there was a lockdown in India, and because
yeah,
I think time was really on our side. So because we were able to plan and sort of start working in a way that we started with clients or with elderly that probably didn't have degeneration. We had discussions within the team. Then the team started. We had a basic plan on. The team started working with clients, and
yeah.
like I said, that didn't have degeneration, and that we work with maybe for anxiety, or with any other sort of adjustment issues that we worked with.
Okay.
And uh, that gave us an insight into what further difficulties could be. So we were able to strengthen our plan. We were able to strengthen our approach,
Yeah.
drawing from that information.
Yeah.
And then when we actually went on to work with people with degeneration, I think we already had a kind of tried and tested approach that we knew worked. And because in general we the kind of work we do not use a generalized approach for all our clients. So
Okay.
with
Okay.
every client, there are separate discussions that happen in general, even outside the pandemic. The kind of protocols that we have, the kind of what is done in a session, what is discussed in a session, as I'm sure is, or should be, at least for every mental health practitioner. But I know of organizations that use, say, the same game or activities across the clientele that they have, and which is fair, which is fine if your elderly doesn't have, say, degeneration. It's not going to do harm to them, but that's not an approach that we use, even in when we're working with people who do not have degeneration, and we're working with them on strengthening their cognitive faculties. That's not an approach we use. It's a very customized approach that we have for every individual. And I think that helped us, even when we
Yeah.
were transitioning everything online.
Yeah.
I think those are definitely, two things that helped us. It wasn't easy, but I
Huh.
think, having conversations, and in general having the time, because like you said, once the lockdown was declared, the priorities became something else, right? You had to
Yeah.
ensure that you had groceries, you had everything
Yeah.
else, in place. So, and that kind of also gave the team a breather to kind of, and me a breather to come up with what else
Yeah.
could be the issues. I think, from, even for the team to sort of
Yeah.
recognize and address their own biases with respect to whether or not it will work online was, one of our first hurdles. And to be able to do that, we did a few trial runs, where we were in the elderly's house for a session, but we sat in a different room, and we just said to the elderly that, like I said, we had time on our side. So we wanted
Yes, absolutely.
get them comfortable before the lockdown actually set in. So I think, we were pretty okay by the time the lockdown had set in, and because we'd already tried and tested this with people, with families that we were already working with, it wasn't very difficult for us to go on and do this and just offer this for everybody else. So
Absolutely.
I think that was definitely a journey.
I can imagine. And while you were also speaking, I think you said your anxiety, a part of me was also feeling anxious because I was like, I can't possibly fathom, just this transition. And it's so relieving actually to hear that the time was on your side, because it really makes me somewhere feel confident that the people that you were working with, the families that you were working with, were a much more prepared, second much more confident, if not anything else, that there is this access available. If not anything else, we know that there is this one place that will remain like an anchor where the
Right.
world around me is changing. I
Right.
think that is so important that you're also talking about that, Tanvi. The other thing that I was thinking about, and maybe this also comes from my experience with holding webinars with the elderly, it was, I don't know, I mean, I always thought of, say, the second inning of your life to be where you will, enjoy and you will chill and you'll not be in this capitalist rut of just making money, etc., or trying to live in that sense and actually enjoy all of that. But I just wondered, like, what do you think, what in your experience was it for the elderly to experience the pandemic at this stage in their life, where it can be very disorienting, to be very honest, and for people who have neurological decline, for them to make sense of what is happening. Because I don't know if lockdown was a word in my parlance that I used so frequently, but since Mars, this thing, that word has also taken such an integral place in my vocabulary as well. So it's taking so much time for somebody who's as privileged as me to get used to this. I fail to imagine what it might be like for the elderly actually. Could
Devika, thank you for that question. And I think it's been, honestly, let me start with people who have no neurological decline. I my parents are now in their 60s. Why look outside? My parents are now in their 60s, and
Yeah.
my father is somebody who, even though he is retired, he's somebody who is extremely active. He's probably busier than I am on most days. You know, so he has really sort of molded his life around to where and how he'd like to lead, as you call it, the second innings, you know, of his life. So he goes for, oh well, before the pandemic, he used to go for a morning walk. He had a huge circle of friends there, who he would like chill with later. Then he'd come back. There's a club that we're members of, so he'd go there. He doesn't know how to swim, but he just kind of, chill with his friends in the pool, or, play cricket or something like
Yeah.
that. He'd come back, have lunch, rest, through the afternoon. In the evenings again, he'd kind of go out and, meet another set of friends, or and this was his life. This was his life before the pandemic. Now, suddenly, when you say that, you're not going out anywhere, what does an individual do? And this is not him. This is everybody. At least he is very well versed with technology, and he has me who lives with him, to kind of help him in case, he is, he doesn't know how to send a file, or, whatever, like tech support, right? I'm there.
Yeah.
But there's so many seniors who live by themselves, who live, who have their children not in the same country, not in the same city, not in the same house. uh,
Yeah.
you know uh, so many of their schedules have been disrupted.
Of course.
I think we put out a video very early on in the pandemic, sort of addressing how you could, try and retain your schedule. And, the only
Okay.
answer at that point was to transition as much as possible online. So we've helped a lot of the elderly that we work with do that. So, we know people who say, other than the sessions, had maybe satsangs that they were a part of, or,
Absolutely.
anything else, really, a yoga class, a physiotherapy
Yeah.
session. And we, even when a family said to us, or the elderly said to us, नहीं पर ये online में मजा नहीं आता है, it's
हाँ.
same, or something like that. The idea, the point of retaining or doing that is not, at this point, given the year that we are in, is not so much the effectiveness of how that effective that activity is for you, but it's just to sort of maintain a sense of orientation, to maintain,
Fair enough.
some sense of normalcy. Because otherwise, imagine if, so many people had a wonderful schedule, had a life all laid out, and one fine
Absolutely.
day it was just kind of uprooted and it was no longer there.
Yeah.
We need some semblance of that routine, some semblance of that normalcy, to,
Absolutely.
exist. In fact, routine, even empirically,
Uh-huh.
there are many studies, and it is linked to
Hmm.
well-being.
Yeah.
It is linked to, a lack of routine is sometimes associated with, higher risk of depression or anxiety or a neurodegeneration even. When we start working with families, even before the pandemic, where we, especially when we were working with people who were degenerating, one of the first things that we would consult the family on was to help them fix a routine. So now,
Okay.
in the
Okay.
lockdown,
Hmm.
with a no routine in place, how do you ensure the well-being? Because the elderly,
Exactly.
it's anchoring, right? A routine is an anchor to how your day flows. So where does their sense of well-being, where does their sense of purpose come from? Whether it is somebody
Yeah.
that is, degenerating or not,
Yeah.
the lack of a routine is devastating,
Of course it
to
is.
say the
Yes.
least. And the lockdown has also taken away so many other things, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like this population had, was thriving when it came to socialization. It was absolutely not. Even outside of the pandemic, loneliness was a very big issue amongst seniors. They would maybe see perhaps one or two people a day, maybe not even that, you know and this is outside the pandemic. So when in the pandemic, this issue has just magnified, um, has just become bigger, which is why which is the reason why one thing that we had recommended right in the beginning was to transition everything online, because at least you'll see somebody, at least you'll see your friends, at least you'll, because,
Yeah,
we advise the families that even if you're not living with them, it might not be unthinkable to do like a 5 or a 10-minute video call every day.
of
You
course.
know, or maybe have different members of the families do it,
Yeah, yeah,
something of that sort, because that was needed in the beginning. Now I think people are fairly used to, the lockdown life, and
yes,
I think there is some sense of normalcy, or there is some sense of being okay that has somehow set in,
yeah,
emotionally, but cognitively, nevertheless, this year hasn't been great for most seniors. And I'm really, really afraid, as is the rest of the world, and as is the rest of the, I mean, neurological world, that uh, we are possibly looking at, an epidemic of sorts, or a
yes,
sudden spike in cases with degeneration, because I think that's something that is going to be an effect of, this lockdown, and this uh, disruption of routines, and uh, you know uh, even more, reduced socialization and things like that. So I
yeah.
think all in all, it that's something that remains to be seen, but we're certainly gearing up for that.
It's interesting that you're also talking about that, Tanvi, because as you were also speaking, I kept on feeling that we are still to find out the long term impacts, the long term neurological impacts it has had on our brains, our so called healthy functioning, whatever that means, brain as well, and this to survive such a macro level trauma and what does to your neurology. I think it would be very, very alarming as well as very interesting to look where we are going, and perhaps something like you're saying we should also be prepared for as well. And while you were also talking about that, one thing that really came to my mind was, even if you were, say, let's suppose, not staying in the same house with your parents but staying nearby, you couldn't go visit them because there was always this fear lurking that what if I give the virus to my grandparents, and I, because they are at a vulnerable sort of
Absolutely.
age. So even when there was, say, access, or even when there was availability, we couldn't actually
No, and I think that's
capitalize.
true even today. I mean, my father has, started stepping out of the house almost every
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
He goes for a walk, or he just sort of, yeah. But I don't see myself doing that because of the same reason,
yeah,
because I don't want to give him something. So I
exactly.
absolutely understand the fear, where that fear stems from, and it's a very valid one.
Yeah, and I was just wondering that even when there is, say, availability, there is no access, and this space of loneliness that you were also talking about. I wonder what mental health impacts can loneliness have, because there have been studies after studies that are really talking about isolation and what isolation can do. I mean, just not to take this lightly, but when there was no law, etc., this was used as a punishment, that you isolate a person and keep them, because it's so painful, and it's so difficult to do that. And here we are just suddenly expecting ourselves to transition into this way of living. I really wonder that, did the elderly, whilst you were maybe speaking with them, talk about how their mental health has been, perhaps people who either have neurological decline or don't have neurological decline? Were there certain concerns that they brought about?
Certainly, Devika. I think, in across just people that we were already working with, or people that reached out to us through the course of the pandemic. I think
Mm-hmm.
this has been a very common theme: the loneliness, the inability to go and see people, missing people, not knowing how to deal with it. I think this has been a common theme across, the work that we've done, and it's heartbreaking, because a lot of other times it would involve us being able to find out solutions, us being able to strategize what could be done. But in this one moment, in this one instance, we were all truly helpless because,
Of course.
like I said, there was no other alternative mostly other than directing the person to seek that companionship virtually. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
the elderly also suffered greatly because there was no domestic help that was coming in. So unless there were attendants that were living with them, they were and that may have been their only companionship for a lot of people, even outside the pandemic. So I think it has been very heartbreaking on that front, and
I'm
not just in
sure.
India, globally. I think in India, fairly, there were a lot of organizations. I know Project Mumbai was doing, a lot of work with the elderly,
Yes.
helping them with, groceries or,
Yeah.
things like that. I know. Uh, so at least that level of stress or that level of worry was maybe
Yeah.
addressed, was taken care of. But
Yeah.
I think in general, companionship for the elderly has been something that has, taken a hit through
I'm
this
sure it
pandemic.
has.
And,
Yeah.
coming to your question about the effects of isolation on health or mental health, there have been so many studies outside of the pandemic even that have linked isolation in older adults to, again, things like, heightened risk of things like depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, generalized anxiety disorders. If an individual has had a stroke, it has it has also been linked to poor post stroke, sort of a
Recovery.
recovery. It is known there is an association in accelerated, neurodecline. So isolation in itself is not great, so this year, given the disorienting nature, and of disrupted routines, and the isolation has, just compounded the problem for, our seniors.
Yes, absolutely. And I'd like to maybe take 1 second to reflect on something very important that you said when they said that, "Arey, ye online mein maza nahi aata hai." And then you said it's really not about the effectiveness at this point. It's just, getting the person to interact with another human being. And I was just wondering, Tanvi, that how a thing that was supposed to be pleasurable was no longer pleasurable and became a necessity actually. So
Yeah.
the whole concept of lost pleasure, when we talk about elderly, we never speak about pleasure in that sense. We're just like, just do it. You know what I mean? And something that you said, it really stuck with me, that one source of pleasure that was there in their life, mostly one source of that was there, was also very brutally taken away from them, and taken away from them, like you and I can still maybe take some risk and say venture out and come back, but a population which is so vulnerable, how do you do that? How do you do that kind of thing? I think that's so difficult to do. And our work with Project Mumbai was also telling the same thing, like an elderly cannot stand for in the line for the groceries for, like, hours and hours. And that was what we were dealing with when the pandemic really hit us and the lockdown was initiated. So all of these things really bring such nuances to light. So I really want to thank you so much for making me think on all these directions as well. But I whenever, and I think this is my favorite part of our conversation, because maybe I have vested interest, who knows. Whenever we are in caregiving professions, I think burnout becomes an essential part um, of the profession. You cannot avoid it. You can maybe defer it or prevent it or whatever, do something around that, but it is going to set in. And like you also mentioned, with the year that 2020 has been, there has been a spike in mental health concerns. There have been much more visibility of those concerns as opposed to invisibilization. But it did put a huge stress on mental health professionals and their mental health. So if that's okay for me to ask you, Tanvi, how did you take care of your mental health whilst you were dealing with this? And I'm sure there must be certain days where you must be feeling down and out, because I'm sure you also are living through a pandemic for the first time. And to be a caregiver and live through a pandemic and then perform the roles that we perform, that really poses a very integral challenge to our whole well-being. So I wonder, what were your some strategies, quote unquote, that you used to take care of your mental health, and how have you been in general as well?
Thank you, Devika, for that question. I think it's a very, very, important
Yes.
question, one that often goes unaddressed.
Yes.
I think, like you said, we were all living through the pandemic. We are all living through the pandemic. It's not yet past, unfortunately. Uh,
Unfortunately.
but I think we're all living through this really unprecedented time, which we didn't know. And personally, for me, I maybe it's training, maybe it's just this ability to do that. But I have always been able to like switch on and switch off, like
Okay.
before, and like if um, I've had even like in my personal life, I've had times that are very challenging pre-pandemic as well, emotionally. And I've always been able to when I'm in the session, it's like my personal life doesn't exist. I don't know how to explain that.
I get what you're saying.
I could be howling and crying and just like breaking down in my personal life. But if you see me in a session, if you see me, in a meeting, you wouldn't be able to guess. And
Yeah.
it's not just an external sort of a surface. It's also internally. I don't. It's just I have that ability to compartmentalize. So in terms of, so that's how I have been. So I don't believe I have really skipped out on sessions or skipped out on meetings through this time. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. If
Of course.
if I didn't have this natural, or I don't know, like
Something innate ability.
ability to compartmentalize, I think what I would have done is probably put in a mental health day, or just sort of discuss with my team, see if they somebody else can step in and take over, or just
Yeah.
not take in that session, because there's no reason for an upheaval in my life to spill over to the work that I am doing with
Yeah.
clients, or whatever else. But through the pandemic, I wouldn't lie, it has been extremely challenging for me, because outside the pandemic, there is always one is always doing a million things, right? And physically, right now everything is online. So you're doing 3 sessions, and you're running off to somewhere else for a
Yeah.
seminar, you're running off to somewhere else for a meeting. And
Yeah.
I think for me personally, I miss that level of busyness.
Mm.
I know this is probably very in this capitalistic conditioning and whatnot, perhaps, but I really miss that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think the sense of accomplishment, or the sense of usefulness that I derive, or all of us derive from these opportunities, or these was somewhere missing, was somewhere not coming in, because I mean, I do have to agree with my clients, your maza nahi aata hai.
Huh.
It's not the same.
It's not.
But that being said, I did ensure that my well-being was also taken care of. I got around to,
Fair enough.
I think in some months I was cooking things that I like. Then I got around to doing a fair bit of painting, which I honestly in school I wasn't great at all. But who cares? It just brought me
Yeah.
a lot of joy to be able to put a brush to a paper and make something out of it. I
Fair enough.
dance as well, so my dance classes transitioned online, which again is not the same as dancing in a studio with
Yeah.
an instructor. But I think up until December I was very religiously sticking and following to those dance classes. Then, like, the batch that I am, the level hasn't started, so since December it's a bit off. But one thing that I've definitely tried to do through up until for a majority of the lockdown has been following some level of routine. I mean, work certainly brings in an amount of routine, but even outside that, to be able to focus and give time to myself and do things that I enjoy, um,
Sure.
including spending just time with my parents, just chatting. I've watched a lot of movies, I've watched a lot of series, and I don't personally, I don't do that as a way to escape. I really enjoy that, and I've never
Fair
really had
enough.
the time to gobble so much content. So I've just derived a lot of joy from that. I think
Fair.
around December, when it got a little too much for me, uh,
Hmm.
I went away to Goa for, right before the peak period hit. Went away to a very secluded beach where there was literally nobody other than maybe like three cows and me. And
Sounds like a dream, Tanvi.
it does, and I was so
Yeah.
happy for the first time in so many months to like not, necessarily wear a mask. Like, of course, if I saw people, I would immediately like wear it on.
No, of course, I
But
agree.
just the if there was nobody in the vicinity, on the
Yeah.
whole stretch of beach, I can't see a single person. Then I would just sit by myself and
Yeah.
just read a book or just swim. Oh, that was wonderful. So I think that was like well, a very welcome break. And that I think helped reset a lot of my emotions as well, because this year
Yeah.
has been a nightmare.
Yeah. 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 No, thanks so much for sharing that as well. And it seems that this ability to disengage is indeed a gift as well. But I still see that, all of us need that downtime. And it's nice to hear that you got that as well. But if you could maybe also speak about as a team, because I learned that you have a team also, and you are also, so to say, the person who is maybe in charge of the team, for the lack of a better term. How was your team experiencing this pandemic? What were their mental health concerns, if there were any? And were there any organization sort of policies set in place, or were there any, say, dictates slash mandates that were rolled out, or memos sent out that, hey, you can maybe take a downtime if you want? And I know it may not be possible all the time, but were there conversations around that? How did the organization sort of respond to mental health needs of the workers, if you
So,
could talk
Devika,
about
a
that?
lot of the, with respect to time off or things like that, our policies have been sort of already, not the kind where you need to, inform us much in advance or whatever.
Fair enough.
They have been, even outside of the pandemic, there have been times where team members may have reached out to me and, may have told me that, I'm not, feeling, up to it, or, which is, they may not have on paper termed it as a mental health day, not that there's anything against that, but
Of course, yeah.
they may have just they all they have to do is send me an email, or get on a call with me and tell me that they're not up to it, or send me a text. And we anyway have a system within the team where uh, somebody else can kind of swoop in and take on, or they can reschedule their sessions. So that's
Lovely.
something that we have been practicing even much before the lockdown. And the reason is because with the elderly, one of the things, like I said, because I already stressed on how important routine is,
Yeah,
sometimes for whatever reason, if one therapist isn't able to come in, the elderly may be looking forward to these sessions, because that's one thing that, they really enjoy, and they really look forward to, seeing another
yeah,
individual. So to not have that session can sometimes not be a great idea. And you
correct.
can't randomly throw in somebody from the team and say, hey, you know what, you're free, so why don't you take this one? It doesn't work like that.
Of course,
There
yeah,
has to be some degree of familiarity that the elderly has with, the other team members. So uh, it's not been uncommon where, team members have called me on the day itself and have said that, there is something else, or something has come up, or they're not all right, or, um, because we're all women as well, there is they could just have a bad menstrual day, or something
yes,
like
of
that. And
course.
so that's never been an issue even outside the pandemic.
Hmm.
So within the pandemic, I think that has become easier, because at least like commute has been taken out of the equation. So one thing that I think we with the team, there were no salary cuts or pay cuts that were issued.
Fair.
Even though like in the initial months it was a little difficult. I was not drawing a salary for many many months, but for the team there were no salary or pay cuts that were issued. uh,
Okay.
you know uh, at least until December, and after that we've had a performance based sort of a system, because we've had, I mean, enough time to kind of figure out how things work and whatever else. But up until that time, we nobody was sort of questioned, or there was no like it continued being as flexible that it was before as well.
Fair.
And because the salary or whatever was a major source of stress for most other people working, because most people either lost their jobs or lost
More than
salary.
1 hour.
We didn't fire anybody,
But we are coming from
Yeah.
Kolya.
the time, and we didn't also issue any pay cuts
What waiting
at
for
all.
me?
Yeah.
कुछ
So
नहीं है?
I think
No.
that definitely did help.
Uh-huh.
A lot of stressors for the team also came when some of their parents had contracted, you know, COVID. So that was quite disheartening. But and of course, I mean, as somebody in charge, like you said, I have always reached out, and I have always offered the space for them to. For somebody else to step in and take over, but I think my team has also been sort of responsible in that space, and more than responsible, I think it's also a two-way street where they have never really used that opportunity, or maybe once in a while they're very they're also very mindful about
Of course.
in
Yeah.
most cases. But I think as policies go, or as a culture goes, that has already pre-existed the
From that way it took
for us.
40 minutes and
That's so refreshing to hear, actually, Tanvi, and it's really nice to see that this is this was already taken care of before something like that happened. And I think as mental health organization, it also becomes sort of our duty to sort of extend that help and extend that kindness to their own employees as well. And I just maybe one last question I'd like to ask. So if I am an elderly in India and I would like to reach out to certain portals or certain spaces of help, what would you recommend? Of course, your organization being one of them. Any other spaces you think, or resources that are really good, can check out, maybe also available, say, free of cost for most of us who may not be say that privileged to access help? If there is something that you'd like for us to be aware of, that would be really helpful.
I think I am aware of multiple organizations, Devika, but most of them have some kind of a fee.
Hmm.
I don't know any, you might have some organizations that when they're starting out as a
Hmm.
promotional sort of an event, have stuff free. But eventually, if you want to continue going to those events, or if you want to continue being a part of that group, sort of make
Yeah.
a payment.
Yeah.
I think as an elderly also, what is very important is consistency, whether it is with respect to
Routine.
your routine, or
Yeah.
whether it is with respect to where you interact with. I think what they also seek is consistency and familiarity. So
Makes sense.
like you and I may have the ability to go to an event because it's free, and
Yeah.
then when they start charging it, we'll be like, okay, now we don't want to come here, we'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
That flexibility somehow can be a little difficult for the elderly.
I
So
can imagine.
what I always recommend to people who are looking for organizations like this
red
is to
snapper.
maybe go in for something that does not burn a deep hole in their pocket. May
Okay.
maybe nominal charges, or whatever their affordability is, may align
Okay.
with that.
Okay.
But
Red
to sort
snapper
of
है.
go for that, because that there is some level of consistency or an assurance of uh, you know uh, 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 formality that is there. Like when we started support groups in the pandemic, I remember somebody on LinkedIn asking us, why are you charging for these should be free. But the truth of the matter is that the support groups are facilitated by a therapist. The therapist
Of
has
course.
to eat. They are bringing in a level of expertise, they're bringing in a level of their level of education, their level of training. And this is not a support group where we're using the support group to upsell services, or to maybe like use it as a marketing sort of an arena. It is
Of course.
actually going to work on the issues. So
Yeah.
that I think that is something that we need to understand as a population, that when you're talking about free any kind of opportunities, what is really playing there. Is it really, because there are organizations that truly work only for the well-being of the individual,
Sure.
which are typically backed by trusts, or that are typically backed by international CSRs or something like that. But a
Yeah.
lot of the free things that are out there are simply a disguise in place to market whatever service, or whatever is whoever is kind of doing it. So I think that's the
Interesting.
question
Yeah.
that we really need to ask, because at the end of the day, what we're putting at risk there is our elderly, and their
No, of
well-being.
course. Of course. And I think this is also such a great feedback for us also, that the next time we are also looking at a service, it's good to maybe take these points and evaluate that service before you want to put your elderly through that experience as well, because that can be in fact more harmful than doing good. And I do really
Absolutely.
understand the
And
ethics
sorry,
that come
just
with
to
it.
kind of, I realize your question was about organizations, which I
Mm.
didn't address. I think there are there are quite a few like support groups and organizations in general across various cities. So,
Okay.
I think there is something called the Silver Age Foundation in Kolkata,
Yes.
which, I think does either I don't know if they charge or if it's free, but I think there is a fair amount of work that they do. They offer like a club and stuff for the elderly. I think there are multiple such local clubs within
Fair
suburbs
enough.
of Bombay, where people could find, like, I know Santa Cruz has a senior citizens association that does a lot of work, including health, and very very active group of seniors, that does a lot of work, that does a lot of charity, that does a lot of activities, has seminars, everything that you can think of is there. And I think that's true for like most of the suburbs that have their own kind of a club or whatever else. I think,
Okay.
if one is looking for some kind of a uh, avenue to socialize, I think these are
Yeah.
great. uh,
Yeah.
with respect to dementia or with respect to neurodegeneration, personally, I feel it is always best to go for services that one can afford, because it comes with a sense of consistency. Unless you like ARDSI is a great institute across the country, especially in South India, in Chennai and in Kerala, etc. The Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Society of India, ARDSI. I
Okay.
think they have like some memory cafe and things like that, which is free, and so I think that is definitely a consistent sort of space for the elderly. Uh,
Okay. Okay, that sounds very informative, and just going to quickly draw attention to the time as well. And I think we've very well managed to keep time, which is unusual of me because I keep going on and on when it comes to such things. But Tanvi, I'd really like to maybe once again extend my gratitude on behalf of Project Mumbai and Fitket for you to come here and talk about such an important and an integral part of our existence as well, something that we can prepare for ourselves as well. I think, much more in advance, but we can, and we can take care of all of these things. And at the same time, I really, I have known your organization since a long time, and I've been, it's like a very careful spectator of it as well. So I know that you guys are doing good work. So really, thank you so much for being a safe space for so many of us. And once again, I'd like to really, really thank you for coming in and spending this hour with us. Thanks, Tanvi. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Devika, and thank you for doing such a wonderful conversation. I usually am a part of like many webinars, but this has been very conversational, very natural. You're very
Thank you.
invested into the conversation, which makes one even more passionate or makes one even more enthusiastic about participating. So thank you for facilitating such a beautiful hour, and of course, like I said, for Fitket and Project Mumbai for taking on this conversation in the first place, and for addressing the mental health needs of the elderly. I think this has been great, and thank you so much for having me over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Looking forward to working with you, Tanvi.
Same here, same here.
Awesome, Tanvi.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
Yes. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye. You
Yeah.
too.